على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلق أجمعين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. بقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ثم أنشأناه نشأة أخرى أو ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Before we begin, can I have the brothers come just a little bit forward and to my left, so that when the others want to join us, inshallah, they can join us easily. Please send a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And maybe just a little bit forward, a second louder salawat. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In these past few nights, we have been talking about the value of human life and human beings in general. And the topic for our discussions these few nights that we are together is how to be human in a world that is increasingly becoming more inhuman. How to be a human being when the world is so inhumane and inhuman. Last night, we started discussing what are the distinguishing features that Allah and His Ahlul Bayt, the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet of Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih, sallu ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. What they teach us about what are the distinguishing features that make a human so important in the eyes of Allah. I repeated these verses from Surah Al-Mu'minun, in which Allah, He describes the creation of humankind. He says that human beings were created from a liquid, from a fluid. And then Allah, He changes that fluid, that physical being, until he gets to a state. ثُمَّ خَلَقْنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عِظَامًا فَكَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ. Allah, He describes for us, and these are some of the beauties of the Quran, that we have to really pay attention to how Allah changes the way that He uses His words to describe a whole world of meaning that if we just blink our eyes, we might miss it. He says, ثُمَّ خَلَقْنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقَةً. He first makes this nutfa, this little piece, into a alaqa. He develops the body. And then the alaqa, it becomes almost like a piece of chewed meat. مُضْغَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عِظَامًا. Throughout this entire process, Allah is using the word khalq. خَلَقْنَا. We created. He first creates from that fluid, and then that fluid becomes a little piece of the fetus, and then the fetus develops, and as it develops, it changes form. And then Allah says, then we develop the bones, and then the bones are covered by meat and by flesh. And then He switches the word. Thumma. First, Allah, He sets the barrier, the boundary. Says, thumma. There is a difference between, He is saying, pay attention here. There is a difference between what happened before and what is happening next. Thumma ansha'nahu. Then not only does Allah say thumma, but He also says that there is a different process that is taking place here. Ansha'nahu. We began a different process. Ansha'nahu khalqan akhar. That there is a different creation here. Allah does not say that I am the greatest creator because I have created the physical body of the human being. Nor does He say, I am the greatest creator because I have created the greatest heavens in the skies, or the most beautiful planet with all of this life teeming through it, all of the trees and the oceans, the fish and the animals. But He only says, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ, when He gets to this point in the human creation. ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. The question is, what is this خَلْقِ آخَر? This other creation, other form of humankind. What is it that distinguishes human beings? Last night, we began this conversation in saying that according to the Quran and the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, that the aql and ilm, our wisdom, our intellect, and our knowledge that are bestowed to us by Allah, this is a distinguishing feature of humankind. No other creature, insofar as we know and we are taught, have these faculties or these features of knowing the world in such complex ways, in such deep and profound ways, of having an intellect and a mind that can explore the world and can understand things that it seems as though other beings cannot understand. To such an extent that Allah even, He shows the angels their weakness in comparison to the strength and the faculty of human beings. He says, عَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. But then, ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ. When Allah presents the malaika with these things, the malaika are silenced. We don't know except that which you have taught us. The knowledge of human beings seems to be a very important factor. But at the same time, brothers and sisters, last night we also mentioned that this knowledge is not enough. Sometimes this knowledge can actually bring us farther and farther away from Allah, the source of our creation, the being that through Him we can transform our weakness into strength. And so if we take Allah out of the equation, then our knowledge can become the source of our misguidance. خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Human beings are created weak, but then Allah also says that a person who is blind in this world will be blind in the hereafter. وَأَضَلُّ سَبِيلًا. And he is even more misguided. Now I want to, there's a few minutes that we have tonight, I want to address this question of the distinguishing feature of human beings beyond just intellect and knowledge in terms of a question that I think many of us are facing or are thinking about in these days. When technology progresses, we're also faced with the limits of how much we know and what we know. And this is, in our day and age, presented in the issue of artificial intelligence. AI has become the hot topic that everybody addresses, in whether they are in technology, in IT, but also on a day-to-day basis. Many of us have become accustomed to using AI, whether we know it or not. Even our Google searches that we take so much pride in, they are also being developed by these machines. And so we have to understand, and the question that I want to have us reflect tonight is, when we think about our intelligence, when we think about what is it that gives human life value, if we say that it's just purely intelligence, then how do we distinguish ourselves, our existence and our being as human beings from, say, a machine or a program that uses AI? And a lot of ways that this becomes a very relevant issue for us. I mentioned last night one example. Many of us might have family or friends, and if we don't know someone personally, we might know that they are other mu'mineen. And if we don't know that they're mu'mineen, we might know that there are other human beings that are being destroyed, their lives are being turned upside down because of these very programs. AI is entering not only into our daily lives, not only is it, for a lot of people, taking them out of their jobs, making them unemployed because now the machine has learned to do your job more efficiently than you could have done it yourself. And not only are we starting to ask whether, for example, we can learn more and better from these machines than we can from, say, for example, a teacher or a faqih, or an alim, or even our maraja. Because in one moment, you can collect more data through a machine than a human being could possibly read for his entire life. It can scan so many different books and give you the answer to your question in the blink of an eye, when it would take your alim or your elder many, many years to experience and to read and to comprehend all of that information. And so not only are we thinking about these in our personal lives, in our financial lives, and even in the way that we approach knowledge and wisdom, but also we are thinking about it in terms of how it's being used against us, and how our militaries across the world are now using AI to kill other Muslims, create target banks that now they use without even human intervention, and they go and bomb, and they kill, and they maim, and they destroy innocent lives. So we're thinking about these in all of these different levels. What is it that makes us human in a world that is increasingly becoming more inhuman? I mentioned knowledge, and it seems like AI is giving us more and more knowledge. And this is one of the places, as I mentioned, many people are now discussing, many scholars, philosophers, even religious leaders, ulama in our tradition, but also in other traditions, they're trying to figure out what is it and what are the limits and what are the distinguishing features of these machines. Now, I know maybe some of you are more of an expert, of experts in this field. I don't want to go beyond my field of knowledge. But drawing from what philosophers, what our ulama and ulama of other traditions, we can try to begin to at least approach this question. And I want to approach it in a number of different ways. First, we talk about how much knowledge these programs can give to us. Now let's take a moment to think about that. The knowledge that we receive, first of all, what is the quality of that knowledge? And then secondly, how does that knowledge determine our actions and reflect upon us? So we say that it gives us so much information. Just to take a step back, does it actually determine for us what is true and what is false? Some philosophers, they say that, in fact, you might be able to collect all the data in the world. But as we see in just this last war that is supposedly in a ceasefire, but not exactly so, that all the information and all of the data, all of the greatest machines in the world could not have predicted the next step, the next moment and the next day in the war that took place. In other words, the point is not how much data you have, but human beings have to ultimately make the choice of what the next step should look like. The future, according to some of these philosophers, is a future that is undetermined, that is infinite, or at least almost infinite in the number of choices that we can make. And those choices are determined by our irada and our will. It is not as though anyone can predict what will happen in the next moment. For people who believe in Allah, this is how Allah is going to determine the next moments of my life or of your life. I cannot limit Allah's power or His might. And so for me to say that I can predict exactly, or even the greatest machine can predict the future absolutely, or even to a great extent, that is false. There's a poem that they mention. It's a poem in English, so we can all, inshallah, appreciate it. He says, in the image of a traveler, "Traveler, your footprints are the only road, nothing else. Traveler, there is no road. You make your own path as you walk." As we're thinking about the choices that we make, how much we can predict our own future or the future of events as they develop, we see it and we saw it in front of our eyes, that the greatest armies of the world could not have predicted how these events would have developed. And so, in a way, these events, the way that they developed, went against even the greatest generals and the greatest information centers that human beings could have created. I'll ask the brothers to come forward a little bit more, and inshallah we can. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So on the one hand, we are faced with a lack of knowledge, that data cannot predict what is going to happen in the future. The future is made in time and in the process. It's not made outside of time. That is one approach. Another approach is that when we think about what knowledge looks like, what is the essence and the nature of knowledge. What does it mean to know? When we talk about a human being and his knowledge, it represents something deeper in the human soul. It's not just about having data, in other words, or how you react to a certain situation, but it's having a certain consciousness that gets developed in the process of knowing and of learning. There's a very famous debate about whether AI is conscious. Maybe some of you have heard this before. But the idea is that if you can't distinguish between the actions of a machine and the actions of a human being in terms of the inputs that you get or that you give and the outputs that you receive, then you have no way of determining whether this is a human being or this is a machine. So imagine, for example, you are giving certain inputs into something that you don't know whether it's human or it's a machine, and then you get certain outputs, and the output is indistinguishable for you. You put certain words, in other words, you type certain things into Google, and you have a conversation, maybe not Google, ChatGPT, or Claude, or whatever else you are doing. You put in this information, and the thing, whatever it is, the program, it responds to you in a way that you can actually have a conversation with it. So I can't determine now, is there someone behind this program who is responding to me, or is it a machine and it's the machine that's responding? If I can't tell the difference, and I can't determine whether this is a machine or a human, the human has consciousness. How can I be so sure that this machine does not? In other words, we determine the essence of what it means to think through the output and the responses that we get. This is a very detailed discussion. Neither do I want to get into it too deeply, but also we can talk about it later. But this is part of the idea that potentially these programs have a consciousness. But then there are other philosophers who argue that just because you might input certain things, you might use a language to give some data to that program, that doesn't mean that that program actually understands what you are saying. If you tell it a poem, does the program feel what that poem is like? If you tell it that you are having a bad day, will the program respond by having that sympathy in his soul or in its soul? I can't determine. If I give it a Farsi poem, will it know what that means? Will it have those images inscribed in its mind or in its soul? Just because it gives me an output, in other words, just because it does what I expect it to do, or it predicts how I am going to respond, that doesn't mean that this has consciousness. And so some philosophers will say that, yes, it can process data, but what we are looking for knowledge is something much, much deeper. We are looking for a consciousness that is deep, a soul that can respond, that can experience, that can have growth. And this is not something that you can find in a machine. And this is also something that the Quran mentions in response to the mushrikeen. The mushrikeen during the Prophet's time, they would deny that there was anything beyond the physical existence of the human being. And so they would say that once the human passes away, once the body, it shrivels and it becomes into dust, then that is it. That is all that we are in this world to exist for. وَقَالُوا أَإِذَا ضَلَلْنَا فِي الْأَرْضِ أَإِنَّا لَفِي خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ. They say that if and when We are dispersed in this earth. We are placed in the earth. Are we going to really have a khalqin jadid, a new creation? Because our previous creation was just these bones and this meat and this flesh. بَلْ هُمْ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ كَافِرُونَ. But rather these people, these individuals, these mushrikeen, they don't understand what it means to go and witness and come face to face with their Lord. They are kafir, they are disbelievers in facing their Lord. قُلْ يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ مَلَكُ الْمَوْتِ الَّذِي وُكِّلَ بِكُمْ ثُمَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكُمْ تُرْجَعُونَ. He says, Allah says, say to them, the angel of death is going to take you away from this world. يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ. Once your bones and your body is now become dust, you are still going to exist. That angel of death is going to take you away. ثُمَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكُمْ تُرْجَعُونَ. And then you are going to return back unto your Lord. There is something deeper that we are looking for, in other words. We cannot determine or delimit. We cannot limit ourselves to the physical data that we have or that we are surrounded by. And this points us now to the other aspect that the Quran talks about. فَإِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ وَلَكِنْ تَعْمَى الْقُلُوبِ الَّتِي فِي الصُّدُورِ. When we attain knowledge, we are not looking to gain more information about the world. If we are thinking about knowledge and that intellect as a way of processing more data, then we have, in fact, lost our path. Rather, what Allah says is that this knowledge and this wisdom is a means for you to enliven and grow your heart. Al-qulub allati fi as-sudur. That is the aim of the human being. That is the source of who we are, what our heart looks like. And the qalb is the source and the place of iman, of faith in Allah. The qalb is not simply some place where we store information. There is a beautiful set of verses by the poet, or rather the scholar, and it is in response to this verse of Surah Ar-Ra'd. Allah says in Surah Ar-Ra'd, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُمْ بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. Those who believe and their hearts become tranquil and at peace through the dhikr of Allah. We're thinking about the source and the essence of who we are. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. It is through the remembrance of Allah that our heart comes to peace and comes to rest. And so that's why many times you might see the smartest people, they are the most agitated and the most beside themselves. It is not smarts, or it's not knowledge or data that's going to bring you peace. Allah says your heart and your soul, it comes through peace, or comes to peace through me. The scholar Fakhruddin al-Razi is a very famous scholar in Islamic history. He was the master of many different sciences, from tafsir to hadith, to history, to philosophy, and all of the different sciences. It is said that he was even a khatib. He says in these beautiful lines that I will recite, inshallah, after a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. That salawat is a little bit weak. I'm afraid I've made you all fall asleep. If we can send a louder salawat. And a third louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So Fakhr Razi, he says that هرگز دل من ز علم محروم نشد. کم ماند ز اسرار که معلوم نشد. 72 سال فکر کردم شب و روز. معلوم شد که هیچ معلوم نشد. ترسم بروم عالم جان نادیده. بیرون شوم از جهان بیرون شوم از جهان نادیده. در عالم جان چون روم از عالم تن. در عالم تن عالم جان نادیده. It's a very beautiful set of verses. He says that I am afraid that my heart, or rather, never has it been that my heart was devoid of knowledge. There are very few things that I did not discover about this world. I spent 72 years. He was writing this at the end of his life. I thought every night and every day. But yet, when I reflected on how much I knew, I realized, هیچ معلوم نشد, that I did not know anything. And he is referring to Allah himself. I am afraid that I will leave this world and I will not see the world of the Spirit or the world of the Beloved. I will leave this world and I will not have seen what the world actually is. In other words, he is saying that we think about this world in terms of the physical reality, but this physical reality has another reality underneath it. And until you don't see that inner reality, the inner essence of this world, then you would not have actually seen the outer world itself. I cannot understand what it means to love until I have a superficial love. در عالم جان چون روم از عالم تن در عالم تن عالم جان نادیده. I leave this world of the body and I have not seen the world within. He is basically telling us that we should not limit ourselves to the outward world that we think about. And our soul is much deeper than the physical appearance that we have. This soul that we have as human beings, this growth that we are called to do, this heart that becomes at peace through the dhikr of Allah, this is a ever continuing process. And if we think that by the more data and the more knowledge we can attain, that we become more profound, then we have lost the source of who we are. The third aspect that I'd like to mention before moving on very quickly is that when we think about who we are as human beings, first we have this idea of knowledge, and that our own knowledge is limited, and yet it is not defined by the data points that we can acquire. And there are certain things that Allah has not revealed to us, however much data we have about the past. That's the first. The second is that our knowledge is not that which creates us or that which defines us. Yes, knowledge and wisdom and intellect are important, but ultimately they are a means to an end for us to have faith and for us to remember Allah, for us to deepen our hearts in terms of the relationships that we have with Allah. This is one thing that no machine or no program can possibly have, to have a relationship with something else. But then the third thing is also that Allah, in that process, in that relationship that He has with us, when He created us from the beginning, He gave us certain faculties that were specific to Him Himself. One of those faculties is the ability to create. To create things that we have seen in the world, to use the materials that Allah has given to us, but even to create things that Allah has never created before in the external world. Whenever we create something, one of the differences, of course, between us and Allah is that when we want to make something in the world, we're using materials that we gain from the creation of Allah. I cannot bring something into existence from materials that are from some other creation, from my own hands. So when I want to fashion this mimbar, I have to take wood, I have to cut down the tree, and I have to bring this thing into existence, this form. When I want to, for example, teach a program, I pull from all of the data that is already in existence in the world. But one of the most fascinating aspects of humankind is that Allah has given them the ability to imagine things that were not in existence before that imagination. Allah says in various verses of the Quran, in Surah Yasin, ayah number 82, in one example, إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَنْ يَقُولَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. When Allah determines and He wills something, He only has to say to it, be, and it is. And Allah has given us this ability in one form, in a much, much lower form, but it is similar to that ability. When I intend something, I can imagine it in my mind, and as soon as I imagine it, it comes into existence. You all can experiment this if you've already experienced this many times in your life, but as soon as I say the word mimbar, it pops into your mind. As soon as I say the word pen, it comes into your mind. And you can change this as much as you want. It connects not to the external world, but to your mind and to your heart. This ability to create, this is an ability that God has given us from His own attributes. He is Khaliq, and He has made us as well Khaliq. Tabarakallahu ahsan al-khaliqeen, yes. But He is ahsan al-khaliqeen. He has also made us, in one sense, as well, a Khaliq. But what does AI do now? And this is one of the dangers that we have. And that is that because we have sometimes given so much of our will and our knowledge to things that are beyond our control, that sometimes it takes away our ability to be creative. And so, as soon as I have a question, I will put it into the machine. And I will get as much data as possible, and this stops me from actually thinking and contemplating and reflecting. And now, what does that do? It forces me now to think about my problem in the way that it has determined. It determines the way I see the world. Initially, we would have thought about wisdom as figuring out how to do the best possible thing in the moment. We would have thought 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that our parents, our grandparents were the wisest people in the world because they have experienced a long life, a life in worship of Allah, a life that has been spent making mistakes, but then correcting those mistakes, a life filled with inner growth. But now, our answers are very quick. We put in the answer and then we expect the result. We say this person, for example, the faqih, he has not read all of the books that AI can be inputted into AI or into this other machine. And I can get the summary of all of the books that any human being has written in the past. And we don't think about, well, there is something much deeper in the process of attaining a fatwa, of attaining an answer. And that answer is not simply the data that is put in. But once we use it and once we become accustomed to it and it becomes a habit and a ritual, that is the only way that we see what knowledge looks like. And so there is a very beautiful story of our ninth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In which the Imam, he is asked, or rather there is a question that is posed to the Imam by one of the scholars of law, in an attempt to basically to show that the Imam is not as intelligent or as wise or as knowledgeable about fiqh as he claims. This was in the court of Ma'mun. Ma'mun was told by the scholar that, or the surrounding people of the Banu Abbas, that Muhammad al-Jawad, he is just but a child of 9 or 10 years old. How are you going to give your daughter in marriage to this young child? The story goes that Ma'mun says, this young child, he has a knowledge and a wisdom that you might not be able to understand or appreciate. They say, no, he is just a child. And a child can only know so much. There's only so much books that he could read. And so they decide to bring in a scholar of fiqh, man who had spent his entire life learning and studying. And this man, he comes and he asks Imam Muhammad al-Jawad that what is the penalty for a person who does sayd while he is in ihram, while he is in hajj? Think about the process. Don't worry so much about the details. The Imam, he responds, well, what exactly do you mean? He's basically trying to tell the person, give me more details so I can give you the right answer. He says, is the sayd while he has entered ihram and he is in Mecca, or is he somewhere later in the process? Is he in Mina? Is he somewhere else? Has he done the sayd of something in the land or in the sea? Did he do this sayd while he was aware that this is haram, or he was not aware? And he asks him so many different questions. Was his intention to break the rules of Allah, or was it not? The more questions he asks, the person, he takes a step back. That this child of only 8 or 9 years old, he understands that the answers to the laws of Allah are beyond simply the data points that I can plug in, the equation that I can have, and then it spits out another result. But rather it is determined rather by the conditions of that specific case. Whether that person, how much does he know? There's a range. What is his intention? There is a range. What are the conditions, the external and the internal conditions? And all of this points to the fact that this world is much more complicated, and Allah's rules and laws reflect the complexity of this world that cannot be solved simply by an equation. And this is where the creativity of our fuqaha, and even much, much beyond our fuqaha, comes in. Our a'imma, they respond to many of the questions that their followers came with in terms of what they saw in the heart of that person. What do you need? Not simply an answer that is chalked up. What is it that your spirit and your soul requires? That requires a certain insight. And then we have many other aspects. And this final point that I'd like to make, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And that is, what do we do with that knowledge? And that is one of the things that we all have to ask. We have these machines and these programs that seem to, in some respects, improve our lives. In other respects, they are harming us. But then they are not simply data points that they gave us, but there is a whole industry behind these data points, behind these programs, that we have to also be aware of. What is the ecological impact? How does all of these machines, they require data processing centers, that these data centers have to be placed in different communities. And this is one of the very big debates that is raging in the US. I'm not sure about where you are, but the data centers, they cause incredible amounts of pollution. There are variation between the different centers, but some of them pollute the water that those communities have to drink. They create disturbances in various kinds. Are we aware of all of the impacts? They are determined by corporations that we have no control over. And these are international corporations that our governments, our politics do not determine or do not control. Are we aware of all of these? They, in other words, take away our very will. And this will is something that Allah has placed as one of the sacred qualities of humankind. In other words, the question is, brothers and sisters, once we have this information, once we have this knowledge, how do we respond? What is the impact and the response that we bring? إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ. We placed this amana, this trust, and we presented the heavens and the earth, and even the strongest things on this earth, the most stable things, the mountains, and all of them rejected it. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. But rather, after having all of the world rejecting it, this insan has now accepted it. According to our tafasir, this is that irada that human beings have. And this irada and this will of human beings, after having known, after having grown, after having become deeper and deeper, creating and recreating, now they have to act. With all of that information, they have to now figure out what is the next step. As I mentioned in the beginning, that is not something that any machine can tell us what to do. The future is determined by us through Allah's will. And this is where we come to the story of Karbala. Tonight, we are turning our hearts towards one of the great companions of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, a companion who was not someone who was foreign or unknown to the Ahlul Bayt. He was in fact one of the people who the Ahlul Bayt would disclose the secrets of his own life to him, the future of what his life held for him. A man by the name of Habib ibn Mudahir, or Habib ibn Madahir. It is said that one day Habib and Maytham at-Tammar, it's a very beautiful story, but a very profound episode in the life of Habib that all of us can benefit from. What if we knew how Allah was going to allow us to meet our end? What if I knew how Allah was going to take my life? What is my response? Would I run away, or would I accept it? And would I thrive in it? It is said that one day in the city of Kufa, Habib on his horse came face to face with Maytham on his horse. And the people were looking on. And it is said that these two individuals, they began discussing so much that their horses came closer and closer together. And these two were talking, and the people surrounding them were listening on. Habib tells to Maytham, "Oh Maytham, I see a person who sells in the market different produce, but I also see a person who is going to be killed, and his body is going to be ripped apart because of his love for Ali ibn Abi Talib, for Amir al-Mu'mineen." And then Maytham responds, "Yes, O Habib, but I also see a person who one day is going to go out into the battlefield, and his head is going to be severed from his body in defense of the child of Fatima Zahra, Aba Abdullah al-Hussein." And it is said that these two companions, they were happy and they were smiling. And they faced their final moments in their lives proud of their connection to the Ahlul Bayt. When Maytham, his time came, it is said that he was repeating and he was proclaiming the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the very crime that the governor of Kufa was killing him for, was dismembering his very body, had placed him on the cross, had placed him on the tree. It is said that until those final moments, Maytham was declaring the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen, until we get to the days of Ashura. And now it is Habib's turn. It is said that when they were in the process of preparing the camps and they had settled in the plains of Karbala, every single day, Lady Zainab and the rest of the camp, they see that the enemy soldiers are gathering and gathering. These small band of men, 100 or so people, and yet on the other side, at first they might have been just a couple thousand, but then more and more groups and individuals come and join the opposing side. And Lady Zainab turns to her brother. In one report, she says, "Oh Hussein, I see all of these enemy soldiers coming, but I don't see many people coming by your side." And it is said in this report that Imam al-Hussein responds by saying, "Yes, my sister Zainab, they may be more in men, but I am waiting for that very brave few." Until a moment that Habib ibn Mudahir, he comes from the city of Kufa. Imagine a man who is old in age, a man who had seen Abu Abdullah al-Hussein grow up into the Imam that he had become. But now Imam al-Hussein, when he sees Habib, his face becomes lightened, and he begins to smile, and he says, "Oh Habib, I have been waiting for you." Imagine how lonely Abu Abdullah al-Hussein was, that he was happy to see an old man enter into his camp, a person who might not have been that strong as someone who was much younger. But Habib was brave. It is said that when the day of Ashura came, one of the companions of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, he raised his head and he saw that it was time of adhan. And he says, "Oh Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, my final wish in this world is to pray behind you for one last time." And Imam al-Hussein says, "Blessings and peace be upon you, because you have reminded us of the time of adhan." And then one of the enemy soldiers, he shouts out and he says, "Oh Hussein, you want to pray? Your prayer will never be accepted." Habib, his ghayrah, it boils over. His protection of his Imam will not allow him to be silent. It is said that Habib, he asks his Imam, "Oh Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, will you allow me to go and silence this kafir this enemy of Allah, who has denied and has said that your salat will not be accepted, even though you are the grandson of the very Prophet of Allah. And so it is said that Habib goes out into the battlefield and he says, Ana Habibun wa abi mudahharun, farisu hayja'in wa harbin tas'uru, wa antum inda al-adidi aktharu, ونحن أعلى حجة وأظهر وأنتم عند الوفاء أعذر ونحن أوفى منكم وأصبر. I am Habib ibn Mudahir. I am that knight in the battlefield. I am, despite all of your men, despite the fact that you are much more multiple in your numbers, but we are much more present and we are much greater in rank. You might bring excuses for breaking your trust, but we are more awfa, and we will uphold our trust, and we will be patient in the face of what we must sacrifice. It is said that Habib, he goes and he fights a brave fight, but ultimately he falls to the ground. Brothers and sisters, these are the final moments of Habib's life. It is said that when he falls to the ground, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein comes atop of his body, and he gives his final farewell to his very close and dear companion Habib. Man az kudaki ashiqat budam, qabulam kun garche aludam. He said, Habib, he responds to Abu Abdullah that, oh Abu Abdullah, I have loved you since you were young and since I was young. Now in this state, oh Abu Abdullah, accept my sacrifice. Abu Abdullah says, oh Habib, you were a very virtuous man. May Allah praise you, and I thank Allah for giving you such virtue. You would recite the Quran in a single day. And it is said that Habib's head at the end of the day was cut off, and then it was paraded through the streets. Men of the opposing army would fight over the head of Habib as Maytham had predicted. And it is said that one day, in one report, that when Habib's head is brought to the city of Kufa, that enemy soldier who had raised the head of Habib, he sees that there is a young child walking behind his horse. And he is afraid that this young child will bring him harm or injury. And he says, "Oh child, oh young boy, who are you and what do you want?" He says, "This is the head of my father, Habib ibn Mudahir. Will you not give him to me so that I can bury him?" And he says, "No, by God, I will not give him to you." But there was another head that was brought to a young child in the dungeons of Sham. We can imagine what that young daughter of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein was going through in her heart and in her soul when she sees the head of her father, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. She says, "Oh my father, where have you been? Throughout all of these journeys, where have you been to give me tranquility and peace? Oh my father, you do not know what they did to us. You do not know how much they beat us. You do not know how much thirst we had to bear, how much abuse, verbally and physically, we had to bear. Oh, my father, who is it that made me into an orphan as you see me? But oh, my father, it is so good to see you once again. Oh, my father, let me take away the blood that soaks your head now, so that I may kiss you one final time. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ.
Brothers and sisters, if you can please remain seated just for a few minutes. We need your help, and we won't take much of your time. Brothers and sisters, today is the 5th night of Muharram, and we had targeted to collect $100,000 to help us cover our Muharram expenses as well as expenses for the rest of the year. And as of the 5th night, almost halfway, we're just under $5,000, brothers and sisters. Our Muharram expenses alone, approximately $40,000. The rest of the money goes towards helping us meet our program expenses for the rest of the year. Brothers and sisters, we plead in the name of the holy names that we will fundraise in tonight. You can also give in their name. You can pledge in the name of your marhumin as well, but please give whatever you can. I'll ask my brother Ahmad Samad to go through the different pledge levels. We've got some volunteers going around with pledge sheets. You can write down your pledge amount. You can either pay the full amount or you can pay over 10 months. We just go each pledge level one at a time, but we ask each and every one of you to participate because collectively, if we all give, we can get to our target, inshallah. We have 5 different pledge levels, and I will ask Brother Ahmad Samad to take us through all the levels, beginning with Grand Masumin, inshallah.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers, just one word. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون وما تنفقوا من شيء فإن الله به عليم. Never will you attain righteousness until you spend from that which you love, and whatever you spend of anything, indeed Allah knows of it. So we all say, يا ليتنا كنا معك أبا عبد الله الحسين فنفوز فوزا عظيما. This is not for 1400 years. I keep saying this. Imam al-Hussein is a continuance for all generation every day. In order for us to commemorate his martyrdom and every year, and alhamdulillah, this markaz, this center, if you see, we have 3 programs. I don't think there's a lot of centers in North America that can do what we do. We have 3 programs. We have the English, the Urdu, the Arabic. MashaAllah, we have very, very beautiful sheikhs that recites and knowledge, and we want your help. So we're going to start, inshallah, with the pledge. The first, can we put the 1400 Grand Masumin? I need 3 people to start. Who will start first for the Grand Masumin 1400? That's for 140 per month. Grand Masumin. We have one already. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I need 2 more people. The faster we do it, the when we go. 2 more people. Grand Masumin 1400 or 140 a month. Brother, this is Imam al-Hussein. No matter what we give, we cannot pay him what he did. He sacrificed everything for us. And in order for us to commemorate his martyrdom, we need to give, inshallah. And this is also goes as a sadaqah for you too, for you, for your family. Dafa' bala. It goes under a lot of stuff. So, and it's a sadaqah jariyah also, could be too, because the momentum of this program as it goes, and we give, this is also a sadaqah jariyah for the sake of Allah and sake of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. 2 more 1400 Grand Masumin. Brothers and sisters, do we have anybody in from sisters? Okay, we'll go to the next one. It's a Grand Imamiyah. We need also 3 1200. Not too much from the 1400. Like it's only a couple $100. 120 a month for 10 months. Brothers and sisters, if you calculate this, we spend more than this in a lot of stuff that we don't even, in our life, that doesn't add any value to our life. Even a cup of coffee from Tim Horton every day, or 2 or 3 cups of coffee from Tim Horton, that doesn't add any value to our life. This adds a lot of value in our life. This is a protection for our kids, for ourselves. You know, our Imam, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, Ajjallahu ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif, is watching all of us. And this is his grandfather that we give. We have a 1200 here. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And we have another one, this two, one more to make it to 1200. One more. We can move to the next one. 1200, one more. We have one? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next one is Bismillah, 786. We need 4 people, 786. $786. It's half price. And trust me, you pay $1,200, you pay $1,400. If your attention, this is how much you can afford, all the same. Trust me. I know, 786. It's $78 a month. We need 4 people. We managed to get the 14 and the 12, 786, 4 people. I know some of you like to give outside, like not be announced, and that's also acceptable and respectful, that you can go outside to Brother Arif, Brother Mirza Abbas sitting outside, you can also, but for those people that need to encourage people, we ask to do it here and raise your hand. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We need 3 more, 786. 786, 3 more. 2 cups of coffee a day. Trust me, this is way worth than 2 cups of coffee a day. This is a dafa' bala for you and your family, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your imam, will protect you, inshallah. Aba Abdullah, ya raytana kunna ma'aka fanafuza fawzan azima. It's not 1400 years, it's every day we say it. كل يوم كربلاء وكل أرض كل يوم عاشوراء وكل أرض كربلاء. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. 2 more, 786 guys. 2 more, 786. No one? We move to Ahlul Bayt, $500. We need 8 pledges for $500. We have 1, we have 2. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. 8, $500, guys. Put me down for 500. I'll do 500. We need 4 more, 3 more, 5 more. 5 more people. Brothers and sisters, 5 more. This is our center. Trust me, it's more important than your mortgage at your home, if you think about it. That's how I think of this center. It's better than my house. I know I need to keep my house running, but I need to keep this running more than my house. This is our kids' future. We need to keep this center going to always commemorate and remember Ahlul Bayt, especially Al-Imam Al-Hussein, salamullah alayh, what he did to us. He sacrificed everything so we can, his grandfather is religious, keep going and continue. If it wasn't for his blood, we won't even be a Muslim probably by now. I need $500. We have another one here. We need 3 more. 3 more, 500. 3 more, 500. And if anybody doesn't want to mention his name, can go outside right now and give there. 3 more, 500. We're going to go to the next one, Ya Mahdi, 313. That's the number that everybody knows. We need 313. This is less than a cup of coffee a day, probably. Or a couple, I guess. 313. May Allah make us one of those 313 that will stand beside our Imam al-Hujjah and fight with him. We got 2 there. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We all say Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif, and we need to show him that we are ready for him. And one of it is given for the sake of his grandfather, Imam al-Hussein salamullah alayh. He's mourning these days. He's sitting and mourning over his grandfather murdered him. And seeing his Shia doing what he's doing for his grandfather put a little bit of happiness in his heart, because at least he knows that Imam Hussein's Shias, faithful to the path of the Ahlul Bayt. So brother 313, we probably, don't mind me saying, pay for a Nike shoes for one of our kids close to that price so he can go and play basketball. I do. I'm guilty of it. Okay? 313 is nothing, brother, sister, for everybody that can afford it, I mean. We only have 3. We need more. 313. Are you guys laughing? I know. That's how much you spent. Brothers and sisters, should we count? Okay, brothers and sisters, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Again, I know there's some of you guys don't like to do it publicly. We understand, we respect that. We still ask you guys if you can go outside and donate toward this beautiful cause. Jazakumullah khair al-jaza. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Forgive me for any shortcoming, if I hurt everybody's feeling or anything. I'm just trying to motivate everybody. Jazakumullah khair al-jaza.
Everybody's leaving it.
I would just start.
Brothers and sisters, we can have a very short latmiya if you stay here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. زاده زهرا ابا عبدالله قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله زاده زهرا ابا عبدالله زاده زهرا ابا عبدالله قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله زاده زهرا قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا الله من کیم خاک پایت حسین جان من که هستم گدایت حسین جان جان من قابلت را ندارد جان عالم فدایت حسین جان زاده زهرا عبدالله قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا دلله زاده زهرا ابا عبدالله قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا لا گرچه دورم از تو گم کردم را روزه خواندم تو را هر سحرگاه مثل هر صفحه مقتل تو خیسم از اشک و میسوزم از آه زاده زهرا ابا عبدالله قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله زاده زهرا قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا لا عبدم و عبد نعم امیرم از تولای تو ناگزیرم وای اگر بی غمت زنده مانم کربلا را نبینم بمیرم زاده زهرا ابا عبدالله قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا الله جز هوای تو در سر ندارم بی غم تو نفس بر نیارم تا وفاداریم را ببینی جان خود را به تو می سپارم زاده زهرا ابا عبدالله قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا الله زاده زهرا ابا عبدالله قبله دلها ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا ابا عبدالله دنیا و عقبا الله عقل ها واله و شیدای ابا عبدالله چشم ها محو تماشای ابا عبدالله نور باران شود آنجا که همه میگویند ذکر نورانی و آوای ابا عبدالله ذکر نورانی و آوای ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله ابا چه شود عمر گران مایه ما طی گردد چه شود عمر گران مایه ما طی گردد در تولا و تمنای ابا عبدالله در تولا و تمنای ابا عبدالله دل ز عشاق و محبان حسینی برده است دل ز عشاق و محبان حسینی برده است حرم و گنبد زیبای ابا عبدالله حرم و گنبد زیبای ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله ابا عبدالله لا ابا عبدالله دالله کاش گویند که در نامه اعمال همه کاش گویند که در نامه اعمال همه پای آن حک شده امضای ابا عبدالله پای آن حک شده امضای ابا عبدالله مادرم گفت که اردل طلب عقبایی مادرم گفت اگر در طلب عقبایی پای بگذار به دنیای ابا عبدالله پای بگذار به دنیای ابا عبدالله 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 صلی الله علیک یا مظلوم یا ابا عبدالله السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا رحمة الله وبركاته صلوات